listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. We got to remember where we are right now in Georgia. Agriculture is our number one business, and they are still recovering and will be. These crops that were destroyed are crops that take years to build back again. Tyler Harper's joining me right now. He's the Ag Commissioner. And look, Tyler, first of all, I got to take my hat off to you because you have kept a light shining on this situation because it's, you know, Americans are forward-thinking, positive people. Farmers are forward-thinking, positive people. But we cannot forget the situation that's going on in South Georgia. Welcome to the program.
Martha, good to be with you. Thank you for having us on, and thank you for you yourself taking an opportunity to shine a light on the devastation that we've seen in agriculture from Hurricane Helene. And we appreciate Coach Smart and his efforts to help us ensure that we are able to get as much assistance as possible for our farmers and producers in that part of the state. But it has definitely been devastating to our agricultural and forestry communities, and I appreciate you taking some time to help highlight that as well.
So tell us what they have to deal with right now, because say your chicken houses have been wiped out or your pecan trees have been wiped out. At this point, you got no way to bring income in. What is currently happening on the ground for these farmers?
So you're exactly right. I mean, even as much as cotton, we have a lot of cotton on the dirt as well in a lot of these places. And so that means you don't have a commodity or a crop to harvest. In some cases like pecans, as you mentioned, and poultry, those are generational losses that takes years to build back that type of operation. In some cases, it could take a decade or more, depending upon where they were and what the status of their current farming operation was. So those folks have lost income not only for this year in some cases, but for multiple years in a row. And so what we're doing right now, obviously, is we've been working with our congressional delegation, and I'll have to tell you, Martha, it's been really great to see how our congressional delegation has worked across party lines and really worked together to try to find a way to ensure that we help our ag community get through this stronger and be able to come out on the other side and be able to do what they love every single day. So, we're working with them to try to work to get an ag disaster package passed, hopefully by the end of the year, to get that in the hands of our farmers and producers so that they'll be able to be able to get through this and weather this storm, as we call it. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, it all comes down to food supply and national security. Right now, America is a net importer of food, but that we have, that's a status that we typically have never been in as a nation. We have the highest agriculture trade deficit in history right now. And that means that we're dependent upon other nations to provide our food supply. And if our farmers and our producers right here in America aren't successful, we become more reliant on them. And finding ways to help ensure that they're able to get through storms like this helps us ensure that our ag industry stays strong. But we've got a lot of work to do to ensure that America can stand in its own, because a nation that can't provide its own food supply can't be sustainable.
So I saw a study a couple of days ago about the number of farms that have been sold in the United States in the last few years because they can't financially maintain them, and that there is like the size of Texas in farmland that is not being farmed right now in America because of this. Are we running the risk of, after what happened with Helene, that we're going to have large swaths of farmland in Georgia that can't be farmed?
So it's I'll tell you, Martha, I'm really concerned about the state of the agricultural economy in America right now. And that was before Hurricane Debbie. That was before Hurricane Helene, and now Milton that devastated Florida. Where we were, and I'm talking to my colleagues from around the country that serve in the same capacity as I do as their commissioner, or secretary, or director of their state departments of agriculture, we all share the same concerns. We have high input costs, high inflation. We have commodity prices that are significantly suppressed right now, and it makes it very difficult to pencil out in an agricultural operation. And so where we were in the ag economy before the hurricane, we were in a really tough spot. We know that upwards of 20 to 30% of producers in the state of Georgia, based on conversations we've been having with ag lenders, we're not going to be able to get operating money for next year's crop season because of where the cash flow situation was and where we are financially as an ag economy. And now you throw on top of that a couple of hurricanes here in the southeast that not only hit Georgia but also hit a number of our other sister states as well. It makes the situation that much worse, and it definitely brings even more concern into where we are in the state of American agriculture right now. And it's going to be a lot more difficult for some of these producers to get back on their feet if we don't find a way to help them through all of this. And so that's why we've been pushing on the federal level. We've been pushing for economic disaster relief on the ag side, but we're really working on the hurricane ag relief, on the disaster aid. And I've talked to all my commissioner colleagues in those states. We're all on the same page and working together to get this done and across the finish line in a block grant format that goes back to the states. That gives us the flexibility to get the funding where it needs to be and as quickly as possible.
So, I'm just a girl that grew up in DeKalb County. We lived on a house with a third of an acre lot. My parents were insistent, though, of me being involved in scouting so that I would have the opportunities to go out into nature and to be a part of things and to learn about a world bigger than the world that I grew up in. My husband, people jokingly call him the best educated redneck you'll ever meet. We get out into the country and we have a good time. I want to help any way I can. Agriculture is the number one business in Georgia, but it's also the most important business in this country as far as security goes. You've got to have food security next to energy. I mean, food comes before energy. Food and energy are the two most important things we need to be able to keep clear. So that I am here to help you in any way that I can, because if we all do our part, we can make things better.
That's right. And Martha, I appreciate that. And you're spot on. Agriculture is our number one industry in the state of Georgia. $84 billion employs 1 in 7 Georgians. It's a significant part of why Georgia has been the number one place for business for 11 years in a row. And as I say all the time, I think the fate of America rests in the fate of our agricultural sector. If agriculture is not successful, our nation and our state and our communities, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to be successful as well. It is definitely national security. It is vital that we ensure that this industry continues to be successful, which is why as the Department of Agriculture, we partner with 40 plus other organizations around the state, and thanks to Coach Smart's help in helping us get out the message. But we've started to do something on our own to try to help our producers weather this storm and get through this on the hurricane, creating the Georgia Hurricane Relief Fund, Weathered But Strong, and it's support GeorgiaFarmers.org. You can also find the link on our website at the Department of Agriculture, as well as the link on the Georgia Farm Bureau website and a number of other entities. But if anybody's willing to donate to that, 100% of the funds raised through this fund are going directly to farmers and producers and landowners that were impacted by Hurricane Helene, to help them as much as we can to help them get through this and be stronger for it on the other side. We got a lot of work to do in agriculture in general to ensure that it continues to be successful. But right now, our focus is helping our farm families and others get through the storm that we're dealing with right now. But we got a lot of work to do on the ag economy side as well to ensure that America continues to stay strong, and it rests in our food supply and our agricultural industries.
One final question. This is the first time we've gotten to talk since the death of Abbott Massey. And, of course, he was just a giant in the poultry industry and the agriculture industry. What would you like to say about Abbott before we go out?
I will tell you, Abbott was loved by a lot of people. And when I kind of first, I remember first meeting Mr. Abbott when I was in college. He was a tremendous supporter of young men and women like myself, and invested back into his community and his state. And I remember that vividly. And if it weren't for people like Abbott Massey, you know, I would not have had opportunities like I've had, and other young men and women across this state would not have had similar opportunities to be successful. It takes the Abbott Masseys of the world to ensure that it keeps turning. He was a giant in the poultry industry, but Abbott Massey was a giant in the agricultural industry as a whole. But not only that, he was just a Georgia giant that he was a phenomenal person who was always a friend and was always willing to, if you asked him for advice, he was always willing to give it. And he's going to be missed dearly at the Capitol. He spent a lot of time after I took over as the commissioner. You know, he spent a lot of time in our office across the way from the Capitol. We always enjoyed having him in our office and spending time with him. So we're definitely going to miss that and the opportunities we've had to spend together, and most importantly, his wisdom, his guidance, and his encouragement. I think that was the biggest thing, is he was always an encourager as well. And but Abbott's going to be missed by our state for a long time.
And he was like the youngest.
We just need more Abbott Massey.
The youngest 96-year-old you're ever going to meet, that's for sure.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. Tyler Harper, thank you so much for being with us today, and please keep us posted and let us know anything that we can do.
Same here, Martha. Appreciate you. Thank you very much.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Steve Moore's with me right now, who has got one of the best-selling books in America right now about the Trump economy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because, as you heard in Brett Baer's interview last week, Steve, he asked Kamala Harris about, are the 79% of people that think the economy's in a bad place wrong? So it's an interesting story.
It is, Martha, and it was a very poor interview for her because, you know, the questions were pretty obvious. I mean, it was pretty likely that she was going to be asked about this issue of what would you do differently, than Joe Biden did, because she had said in a previous interview she wouldn't do anything differently. And she just struck out on that question. She said, well, I can't think of anything again. And she didn't, we're still waiting for an answer to that question, 2 weeks later. But she's riding, unfortunately for her, and I feel sorry for her. She has to, run on the coattails of Joe Biden. And let's face it, the Joe Biden economy has been pretty poor for most Americans. I mean, the latest income data just came out, the last report that we'll get before the election, and it found that people are still underwater in terms of where they were 4 years ago and where they are today in terms of their incomes. And that's because inflation is now 20.3% higher. Now, the good news is that the inflation rate has come down a lot. That's good. But those higher prices are baked into the cake, so to speak, and we're paying them every time we go to the gas. By the way, can I make another quick point? I saw the other day that the latest attack by the Democrats is that Trump is going to introduce a national sales tax because he favors these tariffs.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm not a big tariff guy, as you know. I'm not with them on the tariffs. But I thought, well, wait a minute. How dare you guys say that? You're the ones who basically, allowed prices to rise by 20%. That is like a sales tax. You're paying that tax every time you go to the grocery store, every time you fill up your gas tank. That's a tax. Inflation.
Well, I'm telling you, they're just throwing everything at the wall right now. And honestly, I've told my friends, because Georgia used to never have ads, and oh my God, that's all we got now. And I just told friends of mine on all sides, just don't even watch the ads. I hate to say it, they all have a hint of lie in them right now because they're just like throwing everything at the wall.
Well, it's funny. I was at a wedding in Pennsylvania. The past weekend, and I was watched a little bit of the football games on the weekend, and my God, every single ad. I mean, they must have had for every one Trump ad, there were like four
She's definitely got more money.
I don't know where they get all the money.
She's definitely got more money. So the book is the book is The Trump Economic Miracle, and it is the success. It highlights the success of limited government, low tax, deregulatory policies of JFK, Reagan, and Trump. And I love the fact you include JFK in there because he was really a fiscal conservative.
And he was a supply side tax cutter. He was the one who said that taxes are too high and the revenues are too low, and the best way to raise the revenues is to cut the rates now, and he was absolutely right about that. It's sad, actually, that the Democrats have moved away from a kind of program. Now they're just in favor of any kind of tax they can possibly think of. I mean, the latest thing is, they're still not backing away from this idea of taxing unrealized capital gains, and that's a tax on ranchers, on farmers, on small people like my dad who spent their whole life building up their business, and then they have to pay a tax on the valuation of the business, and he even sold it. By the way, how are people going to pay that tax?
Well, how are you going to pay the tax? And then what if it goes down? I mean, come on. You can't,
exactly.
Do you get the money back?
I don't think they're going to give you your money back.
Well, what I was always taught when I was looking at stocks or investments or whatever it is, that you can look at all the numbers you want, but the only time it has value is when you sell it and when you buy it and when you sell it. In between, it's just fun to look at.
That's exactly right. That is 100% correct. And so you have a situation now where people would have to sell the stock or the company or the ranch or the farm just to pay the tax. I mean, think about, you're a Georgia farmer. You bought a farm, let's say 25 years ago for $200,000. Now it's worth $2 million. You're telling me that you're going to have to pay a tax on that? I mean, where are you going to get the money to pay that tax?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, as you're seeing things, because it does feel like there's a shift going on. We've got huge turnout in Georgia, all over the state. Okay, we're going to have Brad Raffensperger on.
By the way, I just got off the phone with your and my friend Joe McCutcheon. He guaranteed me that Trump was going to win Georgia. So I hope his guarantee is good, because I think if we win Georgia and we win Arizona, we're in really good shape. And there has been a momentum shift. There's no doubt about it. You know why? I think Kamala just doesn't wear well. Remember, there was that incredible honeymoon period where the press treated her like she was Mother Teresa. And now people are like, well, wait a minute. They're actually listening to some of her positions. And, I mean, there's a devastating ad. I don't know if it's running in Georgia and by the Trump people. And it just says, this is a woman who wants to have taxpayers pay for transgender operations for female convicts in prisons. And, that's like, that's just craziness, right? I mean, there are not too many people who actually think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, and that's why I think there's a lot of people that, you just have to keep talking to. And I will tell you that we've got Jenny Beth Martin has got this great program that she's putting in place where it's actually something that John Ossoff, our Democratic senator, did, where they came up with some kind of program where you can take someone's contacts and then match them to voter rolls that need to be knocked on so that you're actually calling people that you know instead of randomly calling someone. And so Jenny Beth has got a plan like that going in Georgia. And it's really brilliant because, because you're going to take a call from somebody you know. You're not going to take a call from some random person.
That's right. By the way, I keep telling people, get my book, The Trump Economic Miracle, because even if you understand these issues yourself, get it for people who, who are undecided. There's still undecided voters out there. And the economy is going to be a big issue for those voters. So, my point is, get the book for people who, a neighbor or a family member or a friend. Because if you read this book and you're a pocketbook issue, and I think most Americans are, don't you? I think most people will vote their pocketbook. That shows very, very clearly that Trump's record has been far, far superior in terms of jobs, in terms of wages, in terms of small business conditions, in terms of mortgages and gas prices. I mean, it's hard to find anything that Trump didn't do better than Biden and Harris.
It's funny. So, I think these undecided voters are very likely not to vote because if at this point you are still undecided, you probably will leave it blank, or a lot of you will leave it blank. And so that's why getting your voters out is so important, because you could have 5 or 6% that just leave it blank.
Right. And look, these states like, Georgia and North Carolina and Pennsylvania, Michigan, they're going to be close. So, you have to do your duty, folks. Even if you're look, I want people who are eligible to vote, and people who are not eligible to vote to be stopped. I don't know if you followed the story in Virginia where the governor I've worked with, Glenn Youngkin, cleaned the rolls, and he found 6,300 people who were ineligible to vote on the voter rolls. And the federal government sued him and said, you can't take those people off the voter rolls, even though that we know that they're not eligible to vote. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that it was something that was fine when Tim Kaine did it. Why isn't it fine when Glenn Youngkin's doing it? I mean, that's it's clearly partisan. And it's just like with Georgia. We've had voter ID since 2006. What we changed in 2021 was that we didn't have voter ID for absentee ballots, and now we do. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you have to, as Kamala Harris, this shows how out of touch she is. Oh, but rural people can't go to the Kinko's and make a copy. I'm sorry, Kinko's doesn't exist anymore. Neither does Office Max in a large way. Yeah. And people are not making copies. What they do on the absentee ballot in Georgia, and I'm sure in other places, is you put your driver's license number on there. They can pull it up. You don't have to provide a copy. It's very simple. And they also allow you to put on the last four of your social, so that if you can't find your driver's license, to put that number on for whatever reason. You put the last four of your social, and then they can verify you.
Yeah. She also made the case, Kamala said the other day, that's racist. And actually, if you look at the polls, 75% of Hispanics and blacks support voter ID. So what is she talking about?
No, and bottom line, too, is about that. In Georgia, where Stacey Abrams and every other Democratic group tried to sue related to our ID law, they could not produce a single person with a name that had been denied the right to vote because they didn't have ID. And the court said, if you don't have a human being, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but if you don't have a human being that's been denied the right to vote, then you have no standing.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, as I said, let's make sure people who are eligible to vote do vote, and let's make sure that, if you got 10 million illegal immigrants in the country,
that they don't vote. That's right.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
That's right.
Yeah.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Eliza Bannon-Jones is here with me today, and she has a new book out called Women Striving to Overcome Bias to Become President of the United States. Ladies, Babies, Money, and Honey. And it's an interesting thing, and I studied this when I went back for my master's degree also, so I'm looking forward to talking with you. Eliza, welcome.
Hi, Martha. Thank you so much for having me on your show this morning.
So, when people ask the question, are we ready to have a woman president? For me, it's ideological. I support women, and I try to get women elected, and I'm always happy when I see more women running. And I'm always happy to see that when women run against each other, they do fine. That money doesn't seem to be the biggest issue because once you get to a general election, you have just as good of a chance to win. But the biggest thing in my research, and I'll tell you tell me if you agree with me, is that the primary system doesn't help women. And what happens is that women are perceived to be more liberal than their male counterparts. That helps you in a Democratic primary. That hurts you in a Republican primary. And so because of that, we get the more far left and far right kind of women running, and that makes it difficult to win in a general election. Am I totally off base there?
No, you know what, Martha? You bring up an excellent point, because even if you think about governing and you think about female governors, and you think, okay, right now there's 12, 13 if you include Guam, and 10 of 12 or 10 of 13 are Republican women. So I think you're spot on with that. The other piece, and I do agree about the primaries, the other piece of it for presidential elections is, and we talk about it, or I talk about it in the book, and it's called the pioneer theory. And that is really that we in American culture look at the presidential role as being very male-dominated, masculine. So in addition to getting through the primary, if you can get through the primary, you have to deal with the perceptions that the President of the United States must be macho, masculine, strong. Does that make sense, Martha?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It makes it a little difficult, and women have to walk that tight line because you need to be strong, but you can't look masculine, right? And that was one of the problems I think that Hillary Clinton had, is that she was kind of a hard charging, you know what I mean, kind of person. And she just, you know, she didn't appeal to a lot of people. And so it was difficult for her. And it was funny because my uncle, who's passed away, he was 98 years old. And we were just before COVID lockdown, I was visiting him, and we were watching the Democratic debate. And he's a very far left Democrat. I'm a Republican, or was a very far left Democrat. I'm a Republican. And he said to me, Martha, if you had to vote for one of these people on the stage, who would you vote for? And I said, well, honestly, anybody I would vote for can't make it through a primary. But I said Amy Klobuchar, because even though I think Amy Klobuchar is more progressive than I am, and I probably don't agree with her on a lot of issues, she's had experience holding elected office. She knows how to compromise, and I think she would have been a good person. But again, she was a little too perceived to be centrist than what they were looking for in that particular primary.
No, I agree with you. And even, Martha, as we think about it, right? So a part of the book, I studied the media and how they're projecting women. And so when you say Amy Klobuchar, I go to that Saturday Night Live, that live sketch where they did the debate of the Democrats. And in that, and in the book, I detail word for word what they're saying. But they were portraying the female candidates as being fluffy and feminine and stereotyped, and not so with the male candidates. And I think that does us great harm. It's a gender issue, not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's definitely a gender issue. And the point that you're making, it really is in that double bind. It's where women have to toe the middle, and they have to be very cautious, not to be too tough, not to be too soft. And I don't know, Martha, but as I think back in the 70s, right, because that's when I started, you know, I was like in middle school and started looking at politics. And I don't know if you remember it, but there's a fair fragrance out there, and the woman singing, "I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan."
I think we're kind of compadres age-wise. Yes. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man.
Correct. And it's like, well, wait a second now, right? And I think that double bind is exactly what you're describing. And, you know, and we do know that there's a lifelong politics and what do you believe and what don't you believe, what you can overcome and what you can't overcome. But I will say that we as a nation are less forgiving if a woman missteps than if a man missteps. Well,
and I think to your point in kind of talking about having a family, you know, when I was thinking about running for Congress, I first started thinking about it in 2004, and I was friendly with J.C. Watts, who was a congressman at the time and was getting out of the Congress. And he said to me, Martha, wait until your children are grown. I have missed so much of my children growing up while I've been in Congress. And, you know, I thought about that, and I have 4 children, and I waited until 2012 to run because the kids were out of the house at that point in time. I did make it to the runoff. I didn't make it out of the runoff. It was a great experience for me, and I loved doing it. But again, we tend as women to be one and done. That's what I did. I mean, I waited. I thought I was the best person. I ran. A lot of times men will run for things they're not even qualified for, and then they'll just keep running until they start winning. And women tend to be one and done.
Yeah. Well, you know, okay, so we also talk about that whole idea of babies. Yeah, well, I talk about babies and, you know, positive, minus, kind of mirror that up to how we as a nation treat women who are having children. We don't have a lot of infrastructure and support. And to your point, we start late. I, like you, started my career when I was 40 because I waited for my 3 children to be old enough that I could start moving around so I could get promoted. Horrible, right? But the thing about that is we really, women tend to be one and done. They tend to have that imposter syndrome where they think, oh, my gosh, I'm not good enough. So that's why we stop. Men will apply for anything in the business world because that's my background. I've been in business. Men will apply to anything if they're not qualified. And sometimes they get it. Women won't do it unless they feel they're super prepared and qualified. And again, that's a story we're telling ourselves that's perpetuated through the culture and how we treat women and how we think of women in the United States.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's an interesting question because I work in a business that's very male dominated. Okay, the talk radio business is very male dominated. And let me tell you, if you go to a conference, all the people that make the decisions are men. Okay, and so my dad raised me to be somebody. I was the youngest of 4 children, and he raised me to believe I could do anything I wanted to do. So I've never thought about myself in terms of gender roles, really, because I just wasn't raised that way. My dad was a great dad. He raised us all to be, anything we wanted to be. But I will tell you that I have moments when I go to this particular conference where I go, I am never going to make it. I am never going to make it because these men making the decisions are never going to make that decision. It's like a boys' club, and you could tell by the kind of parties they threw. The parties were very male dominated. They had cigars and baseball, which I love baseball. I'm a sports girl, but the cigars were not really something I wanted to do. But what do you think about today's? Okay, so we've got Hillary Clinton, who lost in 2016. Vice President Harris is kind of this surprise candidate, right? I mean, nobody expected her to be the candidate. She's had about a 4-month situation here, which is very different. I think it's ironic on a side note that they call Trump a threat to democracy, but yet they had a candidate that had gotten 14 million votes and they pushed him aside for someone else. So I think that's kind of funny to look at. Maybe we should look at that in the future. But your thoughts about Kamala Harris versus Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I think that women in politics. There were some great lessons from Secretary Clinton and what she went through. And even as part of the book I researched, I read her book and kind of got her feelings, and she really was the person that blazed the trail for us because she took it. She took it for her pantsuits. She took the social media about her looks. I mean, she really did face all the ugliness of politics at that high level so that we women who come after her could learn from it. And I think, to your point, because you said something really, really important here in my mind, is that Kamala did not have to go through a primary. So would it be different if she had? We don't know. We really don't know. But I think that process is brutal. And I think that's what I heard you say.
Well, and I also think that while Donald Trump's looks have probably been made fun of just as much, he doesn't care.
Exactly. And that's what my next point was, right? So for Kamala, right, less of it. When she was a nominee or she was going through the primary to become the presidential nominee, Democratic president, there was a lot of talk about her looks and her hair, and when she debated Vice President Pence and her hair, is it real? All of that jazz, right? But now we're a little wiser to it. So where I see her campaign managers being much more prepared is don't let the criticism get you down. And I think that that's a good learning for all of us women. And even when you talk about when you were going to the decision makers in your field, we kind of can't let that noise get to us. But where it's hard is when she doesn't let the noise get to her, if she's in an interview and she's pushing back, then she's mean and nasty. So she's sort of stuck right in that double bind. But what I think what this campaign has learned from 2016 with Secretary Clinton is you can't let it get you down. We as women have a tendency to take that to heart, but you can't let it. You just have to keep plowing forward. So there's a better lesson for her to learn. Because
it's this unique experience that the two women we've have run against the same candidate. And quite frankly, for good or for ill, Trump doesn't care what people say about him. Okay?
Correct.
He doesn't let it. He rolls. He is who he is. My father was a New Yorker, so I kind of get Donald Trump and the way he acts. And so it is what it is. But I will tell you, finish with one thing. I did a paper on judicial elections. And what's very interesting is the one place that Republican women, because my whole thesis was on the success of Republican women, because we have a lot of work to do, which you and I will talk about another time. I think that'll be a fun follow-up. But but the judicial stuff was interesting because Republican women 75% of the time win if they're in a judicial race. And I think it's because they're perceived as law and order, but also a little softer, a little more compassionate, but Republicans are perceived as more law and order. So I jokingly said to my professor, maybe I need to go to law school.
Oh, my gosh, I hear you. I think that the dialogue that we're having at least puts it forefront. So the only way we can change this culture is to know this culture exists. So I think that you and I should pair up. We probably could come up with some really good content.
I think it'd be fun. We'll have some good fun there. The book is Women Striving to Overcome Bias. It's a much longer title, but if you look for it that way. And Elisa Bannon-Jones is the author. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Martha. Take care.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.